My dear brothers and my dear sisters in the Lord, what a blessing it is, how appropriate it is that the National Shrine of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is a destination for the Seton route of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage. Further, this is an entry point of the pilgrimage into the Premier See, the first diocese of the United States, the Archdiocese of Baltimore. As the pilgrimage proceeds through Emmitsburg, moving from here to the grotto at Mount St. Mary's, it will then make its way to the Cathedral of Mary our Queen in Baltimore, and then to the Basilica of the Assumption, our nation's first cathedral. And as this pilgrimage proceeds, minds and hearts will be open to the heart of the gospel. Many will be helped to encounter the person of Jesus Christ. Many will experience renewal, joy, and youthful enthusiasm in this local church and beyond. What a blessing, what a grace. In this holy shrine, where St. Elizabeth Ann Seton's mortal remains lie, on these grounds, where America's first natural-born canonized saint walked, it is right that you and I should take hold of this saint's Eucharistic vision. For from the start of her conversion, the mystery of the Eucharist, the true presence of Christ's body and blood, had what I might call a gravitational pull on her heart and mind and spirit. Hers was a beautiful soul, open to the promptings of God, including those things that were unexpected and those things that would take her far beyond the expectations of her family and friends. Elizabeth, as a devout young woman, worshiping in her own congregation, it is said, heard bells sounding from a nearby Catholic church as Holy Mass was being celebrated. The ringing of the bells first alerted her sensitive, open heart to a Eucharistic faith that would become the foundation of her life. Somehow, the sound of those bells resonated in her heart to the end of her life. For when Elizabeth traveled to Leghorn, Italy, with her husband William in the hope that he might recover from a serious illness, she encountered there a warm, full-fledged Eucharistic devotion, particularly on the part of the Felici family, who assisted lovingly this young woman and her ailing husband. As we know, William did not recover and in fact died while in Italy. But the patience and the love of the Felici family and their Eucharistic devotion made an indelible impression on her beautiful soul. Let us also not forget that the Felici family provided Elizabeth with books, instructions on the Catholic faith, as well as their own personal witness, sharing with her what was the most precious reality in their lives, the Eucharist. Returning to New York, Elizabeth underwent a time of anguished searching, especially as her family and friends tried to dissuade her from converting. Yet her desire for the bread of life became ever stronger. She wrote, "How happy would we be if we believed what these dear souls believe, that they possess God in the sacrament, that he remains in their churches, and that he is with them when they are sick, Elizabeth also recounted how she spontaneously knelt in the street when a Eucharistic procession passed her by. It was a moment of encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ. Perhaps it was at that moment when the anguish of her search gave way to peace and joy as Elizabeth responded to God's call to embrace the fullness of the faith. And in 1805, she was received into the Catholic Church by none other than Bishop John Carroll. She looked forward with happy anticipation to receiving the Holy Eucharist for the first time. At last, she wrote, God is mine, and I am his. The rest, as they say, Elizabeth Ann Seton met with many obstacles and many hardships, yet with her heart firmly anchored in the most holy sacrament of the altar, she resolutely followed God's will, continued to grow in holiness, and became the first natural-born American saint canonized in 1975. As we trace the Seton route along the East Coast, may you and I be overtaken by the same Eucharistic faith that animated the life and the vocations of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. The Eucharistic revival now underway in these United States is a multi-year, multi-pronged initiative, really a movement to reinvigorate Eucharistic faith throughout our country. It has a lot of moving parts, but in reality, it is very simple. It begins with each one of us. It begins with each one of our hearts, listening again to the gospel, encountering the person of Christ, saying with St. Paul, if we have died with him, we shall also live with him. It begins with our being overtaken by the immense love of Christ, the love he has for us, in giving himself for us on the cross and in this most holy sacrament of the altar. As each of us opens our hearts anew to the great mystery of faith, let us follow the example of the Felici family, whose Eucharistic faith had such a profound effect on Elizabeth. They were willing to share their faith, to bear witness to it, and to demonstrate its power in their lives by their patience and charity. So too, as the greatness of Christ's gift of self in the Eucharist dawns on us afresh, let us be willing to share our Eucharistic faith with members of our family. Let us be willing to evangelize and catechize our children and our young people in that same faith. Let us be willing actively to promote in our parishes an ongoing Eucharistic revival. And let us reach out to inactive Catholics who, for whatever reason, have lost sight of the preciousness and centrality of the Eucharistic mystery. And just as the Felicis invited Elizabeth Ann Seton to consider the fullness of the faith, so too we should be willing to invite inactive Catholics to return to Mass, bearing witness ourselves to the one without whose presence we cannot live, bearing witness ourselves to Christ, by lives of patience and charity and goodness. Finally, as we journey from the valley to Mary's mountain, and from there to the city of Baltimore, let our footsteps be guided by Mary, the woman of the Eucharist. Just as Mary carried the infant Jesus in her womb, as if in a tabernacle, journeying to the home of her cousin Elizabeth, so too let us carry our Eucharistic Lord in procession, singing aloud as we do so, "The Lord has done great things for me, and holy is his name." May God bless us. May God keep us in his love.